Hey there guys, oh my goodness, I'm so excited to finally find the time and take the time to sit down and share my very traumatic and very chaotic, I might add, labor and delivery story. I will also tell you guys part of the reason why we did not vlog my labor and delivery. The delivery itself was very chaotic, very traumatic, and the last thing I thought of in that moment was picking up a camera. So I will talk to you guys about that. But let's get right into the labor and delivery story. I will say that I will try to be as detailed as possible, but yet not bore you guys, but yet share the whole, try to make sure you know the full labor and delivery story. So let's get right into it. Friday morning, March 17th, I had to be at the hospital at 7 o'clock that morning for my induction. And I will say the night prior, I was experiencing contractions and just overall didn't feel good, didn't sleep or rest very well. So by the time we got to the hospital, I was so glad that my induction was that day, because I don't think I could have held on any longer. So like I said, we had to be there at 7 o'clock, be checked in, so that they could get me in my room and start the induction. Once I got to the hospital, this is where it gets chaotic. Once I got to the hospital, we quickly found out that they had overbooked the labor and delivery rooms. So therefore, I sat in labor, I might add. I didn't know this until once I got into my room. But I sat in the waiting room with my family and kids and bags and everything that I was going to need for my hospital stay. And all of this, I sat there with about 6 other family also waiting for a room for their induction. So it was made for a very chaotic morning, but I did not care. As long as I eventually got a room and my induction would go, I didn't care. Anyhow, it was very chaotic, and I will say I was hungry, I hadn't ate nothing, I was so exhausted. I was in early stages of labor, and just sitting there for 3.5 hours, I will say, was not fun whatsoever. About 12 o'clock, I finally got a room. Yay. They got me in the room. I put my gown on and got in bed, and they hooked me up to the monitors, got my IV started, and very quickly found out that I was indeed in labor, which was a good thing. So that made I feel like it made my induction a lot faster and a lot smoother, because my body was already geared up to go in labor. My doctor came in and told me right away that I could have an epidural at any point. After they got my lab work back, I could have an epidural right away. And I was indeed in labor, and I was roughly about 4 centimeters dilated. Baby girl was still high up, but nonetheless, I was in labor, so that was a great start. My doctor chose to put me on a very low dose of Pitocin just to keep my body going, the labor process going, and the contractions to get a little bit closer together to bring Emerson down closer on my cervix. So we opt for just to do a low dose of Pitocin just to keep my labor going. And at the very last moment, once I got to the hospital that morning, I chose to do a epidural once I was offered one. Week prior, I had in mind that I wanted a natural labor and delivery and not do any medicines whatsoever. But at the last moment, I chose to do epidural just for the fact that I knew she was my last baby, and I knew I wanted to bond a little bit more with just myself and my 3 kids. So I chose at the last moment to do an epidural. So when my epidural was ready, I took it and it was great. I got my epidural. I was roughly about 4 centimeters dilated. So really my labor went smooth from 4 centimeters up to 8. I hung out with the kids. We laid in bed, chit-chatted, watched TV, watched movies. It was smooth, I would say. My doctor did choose eventually to put me on a low dose of magnesium sulfate because I was diagnosed with preeclampsia. They would rather just, as precautionary, put me on a low dose just to make sure that everything continued to go smooth as what it had been. So I didn't mind. I had my epidural, I was hanging out with the kids, and everything was going fine and great and smooth until it wasn't. Like I said, I took a little nap with the kids, and that was it until I got 8. Once I got 8 centimeters dilated, that's when everything stalled, and then it went from being calm to, oh my goodness. Once I got 8, they noticed that Emerson was still pretty high up, higher than what they really wanted. So they thought that maybe it was because of the way she was positioned on my cervix and just in general. So my doctor knew my water had not been broken at this point, so everything, my membranes were still intact and everything. She was handling the contractions great, everything was great. So my doctor decided to just hold off and let's see how things went and progressed. After about 2.5 hours of being at 8 centimeters dilated, my doctor started to get concerned that maybe we might need to go to or start to consider a C-section. I've never had a C-section, so it kind of scared me. I was kind of freaked out. But as long as I was healthy and obviously she was healthy, it did not matter to me. I did not care. So my doctor decided to do a bedside ultrasound and just get a better picture or ultrasound and see exactly what was going on, why she was still so positioned so high, why my water had not broken, and just get an idea of what's going on. We found out that I had a little bit of extra fluid, and that might be what was causing her to basically float up so high, was because I had extra fluid. My doctor not only noticed that, but also noticed that her hands were kind of positioned like this, and it was blocking her from coming fully down and being pressed on my cervix. So we thought that. Also, the umbilical cord that was attached to her was a little too close to my cervix. So at that point, my doctor gave me 2 options. Let's try to break the bags of water, or try to break the water, or do a C-section. I told my doctor I had my faith in him and trusted him, and he said, let's do this. He said, let me get myself and my team ready just in case it becomes an emergency C-section, and I'll do this. So the entire team got ready, suited up in case that they had to do an emergency C-section. So what my doctor done was he poked a very small, let me say that, he was going to poke a very small hole in my bags of water and see if they could have a control on my bags of water and let it just gradually leak out so that it would bring Emerson down, with the hope that I could have a normal vaginal delivery rather than this being my first C-section and potentially have to be put to sleep, because at this point my epidural was starting to wear off and they really couldn't do nothing about it because they couldn't get me up in bed to recheck my epidural and see what was going on. So at this point, if I had to go into an emergency C-section, unfortunately I would be put fully to sleep with anesthesia. And my doctor did not want that because he wanted me to have the chance to hear my baby cry, see my baby girl. So therefore he was going to poke a small hole and gradually let the water leak out. Unfortunately, this is where it gets very traumatic, very, and everything moved really, really quick. So when he poked the bags of water, it gushed out. It just gushed out as typically the bags of water do. When that happened, her heart rate went from good to almost non-existent. Her umbilical cord has slipped through my cervix. Not only did that happen, but my placenta was tearing away from my wall of my uterus. So I had all of this against me. My cervix was not dilating. I was basically still at an 8. It was slowly dilating, but I was still pretty much an 8. So my doctor had one of two options. Get her out there in the labor room, or pray that we could make it to the C-section operating room and get her out through a C-section. My doctor then looked at me, and I had about 3 doctors already in the room. Once all of this happened, I had 3 other doctors besides my doctor in the room. There were anesthesia in the room. There were several different nurses. My room was absolutely filled full. My poor family, my mother was a nervous wreck. She didn't know what was going on. I myself, that was laying there, did not know what was going on. My doctor looked at me and he said, I have faith in you. We've got this. He said, how hard can you push? I'm like, I had an epidural. I was feeling contractions, but I wasn't feeling any pressure or feeling like I needed to push at this point. So I'm like, I don't know. And I was scared. I was crying. I was in frantic mode. I could not hear my baby's heartbeat. So at this point, my doctor said, get the vacuum. I've never had vacuum used in a delivery. I did not know what to expect. So at this point, they lowered my bed to the lowest setting. I had 3 nurses that got up on me, and as my doctor was using a vacuum and myself pushing as hard as I ever could, nurses on top of me, and he looks at the team and he says, 1, 2, 3, push. We're all pushing, and pop comes her head. He looks at the team and they done another countdown and she was delivered. It happened so quick, but to see, like, my doctor says, look at her, Krishna, look at her. I was in such a total state of shock. I did not know what had just happened. I was in shock. My body went into shock and I just passed out essentially because of everything that had just happened. But I do remember hearing her cry, and it was the greatest sound I have ever heard, from not hearing her heartbeat, because at the point that everything happened, they had the monitor up really high so they could hear her heartbeat. From hearing her heart go down drastically to seeing her born. I do remember her being a little blue, but to hear my doctor thump on her and hear her gasp and take that breath of air and just scream out loud was the greatest thing I had ever heard. And at that moment I knew she would be okay. Once I heard her gasp for air and heard the loudest, most prettiest cry ever, I knew she would be okay. It would take us some time to recoup and gather ourselves, but we would both be okay. So my doctor, and I didn't know I had a placenta abruption until after the fact that I delivered her. I did not know that. At that point, I should have told you guys. So they immediately, after I had her, they immediately take her over to the exam table. I could hear her. She was crying, and the nurses were reassuring me, "Mom, she's great. She's pink. She's, everything coming back. Her APGAR scores were phenomenal." And just to hear all this great news was so reassuring. And they showed me she was pink, she was crying, she peed on the nurses, which the nurse was a-okay, she was crying. But after I regained myself and got composure, and my doctor stitched me up, from what I remember, he talked to me, he informed me what had happened. Basically, when he broke my water instead, because I had so much extra fluid in me that they didn't know, my body was just ready for all of that fluid to be passed. So it just gushed out, and when it gushed out, her umbilical cord slipped down because it was already real close to my cervix. I did have a fall about 3 weeks prior to going into labor, so they don't know. Although they checked when I had the fall, they checked my placenta. Everything was fine. It checked out fine. They didn't see any type of abruption. So they don't know if it made my placenta weak or if really I just naturally had a placenta abruption happen. So that happened, and with all of this in combined, it made her heart rate go down. And my doctor, thank goodness, he knew what he was doing. He done phenomenal. We all worked together as a team and got myself and my baby girl delivered safe, and that's all that mattered. So it was a very traumatic labor and delivery. Just the fact that I had all that go on. She was born, she wasn't breathing as well as she should, but thank goodness very quickly recovered from all of it. It took me a minute to compose myself, but after that I went on and had I recovered very quickly, this was one of my easiest, even though it was traumatic, it was one of my easiest deliveries. Believe it or not. The days after, I healed up very quickly. My uterus contracted down like it was supposed to, and I had a rather smooth recovery. I took it easy. I will say I took it easy. Baby girl, on the other hand, had some issues at first with eating, but quickly recovered, and I stayed in the hospital. My doctor wanted to, because I had such a traumatic delivery, I was preeclampsia, I had preeclampsia. My doctor wanted to keep me in for 3 days, so we did stay a full about 72 hours in the hospital, just as a precautionary, and that was fine. Baby girl, because she wasn't really like squeezed through contractions like she should have been, she had a little extra fluid that had to be suctioned off over a couple times. But after that, thank goodness we're all on the road to recovery and doing so good. And that's all that matters. But that's really the reason why we didn't vlog. My labor went great. It was smooth all up into the delivery, and it went from like smooth to, oh my goodness, what happened? So it was a very traumatic delivery, but thank goodness, like I said again, she's okay, I'm okay, and that's all that matters. But that's the reason why we didn't vlog. We did not pick the camera up. My kids, unfortunately, and my family was pushed aside once everything got real chaotic and real stressful. They had a nurse to take them basically out of the room. They were still in the room, but behind a curtain while everything was going on. So my son, he said he had the curtain, they was all kind of watching from the sidelines, just due to the fact that the team had to get in and do what they needed to do to ensure that she was okay and I was okay, and that was fine. They were still there. They still got to see her be born, and that's what I wanted, that's what they wanted. But thank goodness the nurse was there and talking my family through what was going on and everything. So that was great. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really wanted to vlog my labor and delivery story, but unfortunately it didn't happen that way. So anyhow, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this very traumatic labor and delivery story. I'm so sorry that it took me so long to get it up, but I've had some health issues, which I plan on sharing in a later video. But with that, trying to take it easy in my recovery and enjoy my baby girl who's showing us from the back, taking the nap. But enjoying her and just resting and learning how to be a mom of 4 kids. It's been quite the experience, but nonetheless, I absolutely love it. But thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in another one.